In 2015, a woman in Sunnyvale, California was paying about $600 a month to park her home on a small patch of land. She did not rent an apartment. She owned her home outright. She just rented the dirt underneath it. Then a private equity firm bought the land under her and thousands of other homes and started raising the rent by 8% a year, every year, on purpose. 4 years later, that firm sold the same property for $87 million more than they paid for it. Nobody built anything new. Nobody added a single amenity. They just owned the ground, and they knew something about the people standing on it. They knew they could not leave. This is the story of the most quietly profitable real estate trade in America, and almost nobody is talking about it. It is not office towers. It is not luxury condos. It is trailer parks, manufactured housing communities, if you want the polite term for it. And over the last 10 years, the biggest private equity firms and sovereign wealth funds on the planet have been buying them up, one park at a time, because they figured out something the rest of Wall Street missed for decades. The poorest real estate market in America is also, dollar for dollar, the most profitable one. Here is the man who said the quiet part out loud. Frank Rofe patrols more than 30,000 mobile home sites across 25 states, and he has compared his own business, on the record, to running, quote, a Waffle House where everyone is chained to the booths. That is not a hostile description written by a journalist. That is the industry's own architect, describing his own customers, and he is not wrong. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why that comparison is accurate, how the math behind it works, why the federal government is quietly subsidizing it, and how a second wave of automation is now squeezing even more money out of the same captive people. Let's get into it. Start with the housing crisis underneath all of this, because none of it makes sense without it. Only 38% of American households can currently afford a median-priced home. Back in 2020, that number was 57%. Traditional home ownership is moving further out of reach every single year, and that pressure has to land somewhere. It lands on the rental market, and at the very bottom of the rental market sits the one form of housing nobody in Washington seems to think about: the mobile home park. About 22 million Americans live in manufactured homes right now. That is 1 in every 15 people in this country. Half of them earn less than $50,000 a year. Over 1 in 5 earns less than $20,000. Nearly a third of adult residents are over the age of 60, living on fixed retirement income. This is, by every measure, the most financially fragile group of homeowners in the country. And here is the twist that makes this whole business model work. Building a brand new mobile home park is almost impossible. Local zoning boards hate them. Neighbors fight them. So supply is frozen. Occupancy has climbed from 86% a decade ago to nearly 94% today. Existing parks are functionally small monopolies. If you are already living in one and rent goes up, there is nowhere else to go. Now overlay the actual mechanics of how these parks make money, because this is the part that turns a sleepy asset class into a private equity gold rush. In a normal apartment building, the landlord owns the building and everything in it. Every leaky pipe, every broken appliance, every roof replacement, that is the landlord's problem and the landlord's cost. In a mobile home park, the arrangement flips. The landlord owns the land. The resident owns the physical home sitting on top of it. The landlord's only real job is maintaining roads and utility hookups. That is it. No maintenance calls, no interior repairs, just the dirt and a fixed monthly check. That single structural quirk is why manufactured housing communities generated a 22% annual compounded return between 2010 and 2020. Beating office space, industrial warehouses, self-storage, and traditional apartments across the board. And the entry price is shockingly low. A single lot typically costs around $10,000 to acquire. An 80-lot community can run about $800,000, a rounding error compared to buying an 80-unit apartment building. Premium parks now trade at capitalization rates of 4 to 5%, and even in choppy years for commercial real estate, mobile home park returns barely flinched, averaging 6.5% at the end of 2023. Then there is the tax angle, which almost nobody outside the industry knows about. Manufactured homes are legally classified as personal property, like a car or a piece of equipment, not real estate. That means they depreciate fast on paper, 10 to 20% in the first year alone. Combine that with bonus depreciation rules passed under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and private equity firms have been able to write off huge chunks of these acquisitions against their taxable income. The federal tax code has been quietly subsidizing the entire buying spree. So who actually did the buying? 23 distinct private equity firms now control more than 1,900 manufactured housing communities across the country, encompassing over 400,000 individual home lots. Blackstone, the largest private equity firm on earth, spent nearly $1 billion between 2018 and 2020, acquiring over 50 parks through a platform called Treehouse Communities, concentrated heavily in Arizona and Florida. The Carlyle Group bought 4 parks in Mesa, Arizona for $230 million in 2020, and now operates at least 51 parks across 9 states. Apollo Global Management acquired Inspire Communities back in 2017, which today manages over 100 parks and nearly 24,000 home sites. Even a sovereign wealth fund got in on it. The government of Singapore Investment Corporation partnered with a Pennsylvania public pension fund to take a majority stake in a company controlling 54,000 lots. Hedge funds like Alden Global Capital have scooped up over 150 parks since 2020 alone. Florida leads the country with nearly 300 private equity-owned parks, followed by Michigan and then Texas. Michigan's numbers are the most extreme. 1 in every 10 manufactured home parks in that state is now owned by a private equity firm. Notice something about that list of buyers. These are not obscure fringe operators nobody has heard of. 3 of the 4 largest private equity firms in the entire United States currently run massive manufactured housing portfolios. This is not a niche side bet somebody stumbled into. It is a core, deliberate allocation from the biggest pools of capital on the planet. This did not happen quietly by accident. It happened because the return profile was too good to ignore, and because of one deeply ironic detail hiding underneath almost half of these deals. Here is the irony. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac exist, on paper, to make housing more affordable in America. In this sector, they have done the opposite. Somewhere between 47 and 49% of all private equity-owned mobile home parks identified in recent tracking data were financed using loans from Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Freddie Mac alone has funneled an estimated $9.6 billion into financing the purchase of more than 950 communities since 2014. These government-sponsored loans come with lower interest rates and easier terms than a normal commercial buyer could get, which lets private equity firms outbid small, local mom-and-pop park owners every single time. Meanwhile, the actual residents living inside these parks, the people the loans were originally supposed to protect, are almost entirely locked out of that same Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac financing when they try to buy their own homes. Instead, they get pushed into high-interest chattel loans, often from lenders owned by the very same conglomerates dominating the industry. The government's own housing infrastructure became a liquidity engine for Wall Street, while doing almost nothing for the low-income families it was designed to help. Now here is why residents cannot simply leave when rent goes up, and why that matters more than anything else in this entire story. Moving a manufactured home is not like moving furniture. It costs anywhere from $3,000 for a short local move to $20,000 for anything long distance. And that number assumes you can even find another park nearby with an open lot willing to accept an older home, which is its own separate nightmare. For a resident earning $28,000 to $38,000 a year, a $10,000 moving bill is not a stretch. It is simply impossible. The cost to relocate frequently exceeds 5 to 7 years of the home's entire accumulated equity. So, residents do not move. They absorb the rent increase, whatever it is, because staying is always cheaper than leaving, right up until it isn't, and by then, it's too late anyway. This is exactly the mechanism private equity operators are pricing in. Acquire the park. Raise the ground rent immediately, well beyond what the previous small owner ever dared to charge. That higher rent increases the property's net operating income, which increases its resale valuation. And then you sell or refinance at a massive multiple. When the Carlyle Group bought that Sunnyvale park for $150 million in 2015, they instituted 8% annual rent hikes, more than double what the previous owner had been charging. 4 years later, they sold it for $237 million, an $87 million profit, generated almost entirely by squeezing residents who had nowhere else to go. In Iowa, one operator raised rent and fees 87% in 3 years. In New York, one community watched monthly rent climb from $117 to nearly $400 in under 2 years. And when residents inevitably fall behind, there is a second, colder mechanism waiting underneath the first one. If someone cannot pay the new rent and cannot afford the cost to move their home, they get evicted, and they are forced to abandon the physical structure they own. Under abandonment and lien laws in most states, the park owner can then legally seize that home for free. Every dollar of equity that family built over years, sometimes over a decade, transfers instantly to the institutional landlord, who can now rent that same structure back out at a premium. The rent-nut model just quietly became a full rental model at zero acquisition cost. And here is why none of this gets challenged by some scrappy local competitor undercutting the big firms on price. Operating any of this legally, whether it's the park itself or the retail hub bolted onto it, means clearing a wall of paperwork. Business registration, local permits, health and sanitary inspections, fire and electrical code compliance, liability insurance sized for a multi-state portfolio. For a small independent operator trying to run 1 or 2 properties, that compliance burden alone can be more expensive than the acquisition itself. For a firm already managing 400,000 lots with an in-house legal team, it is a rounding error. The regulatory maze that is supposed to protect residents ends up functioning as a moat, quietly filtering out every operator except the ones with the deepest pockets, which is exactly the opposite of what most people would assume a permit requirement is for. So that is phase 1. Own the dirt, raise the rent, and let the physical trap do the rest of the work. But there is a phase 2 to this story that most people covering private equity and housing completely miss. And it is where this video connects to something you have probably already thought about if you have ever bought anything from a vending machine. Once these firms own the community, they do not stop at collecting ground rent. They audit every remaining cost center on the property, including the old staffed clubhouse or the little convenience store that used to sit near the entrance, and they retrofit those spaces into automated, unattended retail hubs. This taps directly into the global automated retail boom, a market worth $76 billion in 2025 and climbing toward $105 billion within the decade. Historically, that meant a couple of tired vending machines dispensing stale snacks. Now it means something far more aggressive. Open-shelf micro-markets with self-checkout kiosks and AI-powered smart vending coolers that track exactly what you pick up using cameras and weight sensors. The economics explain exactly why landlords are doing this. Consumers spend 33% more at a micro-market than at a traditional vending machine, because they can browse 300 different items instead of 40 and build a full basket instead of making one quick decision. A micro-market typically generates 80 to 100% more gross revenue than a vending machine occupying the exact same physical footprint. Initial setup runs $10,000 to $15,000, but a well-run micro-market breaks even in 7 to 8 months, generating $12,000 to $14,000 in pure profit in its very first year, compared to just $2,000 to $3,000 from an old-fashioned machine in that same year. AI-powered vending coolers push the numbers even further, with theft rates under 1% thanks to real-time camera tracking, and payback periods as short as 4 to 7 months. None of this requires the landlord to lift a finger. Vending management software and IoT telemetry let a single operator monitor hundreds of machines across an entire portfolio of parks from one dashboard, tracking sales, catching theft, and triggering restocks automatically, all without ever driving to the property. Cashless payment infrastructure makes the whole system frictionless. Over 63% of newly installed automated retail machines worldwide now accept digital wallets and tap to pay. And once cash disappears from the equation, operators can remotely adjust prices in real time, charging more during a heat wave, or late at night, or right after a paycheck typically lands, lifting overall revenue by another 10 to 15% without anyone touching the machine. This is not just an American phenomenon either. The exact same playbook, monetizing a captive population through unattended retail, shows up anywhere large groups of people are stuck in one place for long stretches of time with limited alternatives. In the Philippines, transit operators deploy thousands of automated kiosks across train stations and business districts, serving millions of daily commuters, using dominant e-wallet platforms to erase the exact change problem that used to limit vending in cash-heavy economies. The tool is different. The target is identical, a fragmented population with nowhere else to spend funneled through a single automated checkout, over and over, every single day. When you see the same commercial pattern independently show up on opposite sides of the planet, that is usually a sign you are not looking at a coincidence. You are looking at a business model. And the contracts protecting this revenue stream inside the parks are just as one-sided as the ground leases. Exclusivity clauses ban any competing food or beverage service from ever entering the property. Commission rates typically hand the property owner, meaning the same private equity firm, 5 to 25% of every single sale generated inside their own community. A second, completely passive income stream layered directly on top of the rent. The result is a fully enclosed economic loop. The same captive residents who cannot leave because of the housing trap are now also the only customers for the snacks, drinks, and daily essentials sold a few hundred feet from their front door, at a markup nobody can undercut because nobody else is legally allowed to compete. To be fair, this is not happening entirely without resistance. Resident-owned communities, organized through groups like ROC USA, have successfully banded together to buy the land underneath their own homes, collectively in almost 300 communities across 20 states, cutting private equity out of the equation entirely and locking in long-term affordability through democratic ownership. Tenant advocates are pushing state legislatures for rent control laws written specifically for manufactured housing. Others are lobbying Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac directly, demanding that any future loan used to buy a mobile home park come attached to real affordability covenants, so government-backed money stops quietly financing the exact displacement it was created to prevent. These efforts are real, and in the communities where they have taken hold, they work. But they are still the exception. The sheer scale of institutional capital chasing this asset class, hundreds of millions of dollars in specialized funds raised every single year, is pushing the broader market toward consolidation far faster than local organizing can keep up with. So here is the full picture, laid out one more time. Housing scarcity pushes the poorest Americans into the one form of shelter left that isn't subsidized. A structural quirk in how these parks are owned turns that population into a captive customer base with nowhere else to go. Favorable tax rules and cheap government-backed debt let private equity firms outbid every small local operator in the country. Rent gets pushed as high as the market can physically bear because leaving is more expensive than staying, until it isn't, and eviction quietly transfers whatever equity is left straight to the landlord. And now, a second layer of automated retail technology sits on top of all of it, extracting a few more dollars from the same trapped residents every single time they need a snack, a drink, or a bottle of aspirin. This entire machine did not require breaking a single law. Every piece of it, the depreciation schedule, the GSE financing, the lease structure, the vending contract, was built using tools that are completely legal, and in some cases, tools your own tax dollars are actively funding. Nobody had to hack a system or exploit a loophole buried in fine print. They just read the incentives correctly, years before anyone else bothered to look, and then moved billions of dollars toward the one corner of the housing market too unglamorous for the rest of Wall Street to take seriously. The people running this playbook are not hiding it either. Frank Rolfel told you exactly what he thinks of his own customers, on the record, using the word chained. That is not a slip of the tongue from someone worried about how it sounds. It is a business philosophy, stated with total confidence, because the math backs it up completely. The only real question left is whether you had any idea this was happening in a town near you. In a business you have probably driven past your entire life without ever once looking twice. And whether knowing the mechanics behind it changes how you look at that quiet little community on the edge of town the next time you drive by it.